Okay, so let's start. It is now 3 o'clock. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy end of the year day to be here with us. And thank you to Joel for being the sponsor here. Anyway, we are going to be discussing the 2024 CTV State of the Union, which, I feel like President Biden, well, I'll just say I feel like the president, and we'll leave names out of that one. But I want to start off. First, I'll let all you guys introduce yourselves and sort of what you do, just in case anybody might not know who you are. So, Joel, please take it away.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure. I am the co-founder and EVP of Strategy and Innovation at Strategus, specifically within Strategus Labs, which is the department that is tasked with looking around the corner, iterating upon what's next to continuously drive the industry forward and provide our clients and television viewers alike a better user experience with more targeting, more measurement, and overall better experiences.
Okay, and if you are confused about how to pronounce it, just think of the movie Gladiator. It's sort of like, it's like Strategist, Romulus, Germanicus, Strategist. So there you go. Okay, moving down around Dallas, Dallas Lawrence.
Dallas Lawrence, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Telly. That's Telly, the world's first dual screen television offered completely for free to consumers. Excited to talk about kind of the future of TV, what we're seeing here, and how we're helping advertisers kind of reimagine and rethink engagement on the biggest screen in the home.
Okay, and Tony Marlow.
Hello all. Well, first of all, many apologies. I have a mild head cold, so if I get a little huskier than usual, you'll have to forgive me. But Tony Marlow, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at LG Ad Solutions. We're a global leader in CTV advertising and cross-screen advertising. So we have the global footprint of around 200 million LG TVs worldwide. We help to support ad-supported content and put premium native ads in those environments.
Excellent. And I am Alan Wolk. I am the co-founder and lead analyst at TVREV. If you're here, you probably know who I am because you found it through our website. We are one of the big analyst firms in this space, and we cover the intersection of streaming TV and advertising. And we are known for taking complex topics and putting them into plain English in a way that makes it easy to understand without dumbing it down. So without further ado, let's get into this. I'm going to start with you, Tony. We have had this, for years we've been hearing about this thing, the massive wave of cord cutting that's overtaking the industry. And yet we sort of find ourselves in this weird position now where something like 71 million people, somewhere around 57, 60% of the population still has pay TV, and like 80, 90% still also have streaming. So sort of where does that leave us? Like, are we kind of in this hybrid thing for a while, or do you think sort of cord cutting is gonna kind of pick up massively over the next few years? You guys, as LG, have a good insight into what people are watching across the board.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about cord cutting, it's sort of the story is sort of it's steady until it's not. And it was funny, just in preparation for this discussion, I was looking up some of the e-marketer stats, and it's easy to forget that pre-pandemic, so 2019, we were in the 70-75% range for pay TV households, 2019. It is predicted that next year, 2025, will be the year of crossover, meaning for the first time ever in 2025, there will be more non-pay TV households than pay TV. So yes, it's a steady drip over that period of time. I think the pandemic itself was maybe one outlier within the steady drip, as in there was a short period with a dramatic shift. But what's interesting is I think that it also comes down to the content. So it will keep going, but it's hard to ignore the fact that the remaining linear TV viewership really seems to center around two things, and that's sports and other live events. Think like the Oscars, awards shows, these cultural moments that are broadcast live. And as people increasingly become confident to watch their sporting games streamed, I mean, we had the Black Friday game, there's an upcoming Christmas game being streamed. These things are starting to show that people are willing to stream their sports, and I think it will accelerate once that domino fully falls.
Hey, Joel, you're nodding in agreement there.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, right? The pandemic pulled forward a lot of trends that were inevitable anyhow. I think that really kind of what we're looking at now is the critical mass, is that more eyeballs are streaming. That's we as television watchers, not marketers, preference, right? We'd all much rather watch things on our time schedule through a streaming app than we would navigating a cable or a television menu. But I think that with that critical mass of eyeballs and users, means that streaming has become the preferred first starting point, right? So Tony had touched on exactly what I was going to say as well. Thanksgiving, Black Friday, NFL football games, Christmas Day games. The Tyson Paul fight is, I think, kind of a watershed moment where things that used to be predominantly linear pay TV are now moving into the streaming ecosystem. And I think that move is only predicated on the fact that the eyeballs and television consumers have said, this is where and how I want to watch my content. So it may not be overnight, but the degradation of pay TV is apparent, and we're right in the middle of it, in my opinion.
In Dallas, what do you guys see?
I guess I think a couple things. I think we lose track of how monumental a statistic it is to say that about 1 in 2 U.S. households no longer have linear television, because we've been talking about this slow death by 1,000 cuts that's been happening year after year after year, that we've now arrived at the point where 1 in 2 U.S. households, likely your neighbor on your left or your right side of your house, does not have linear television. Yet the biggest brands in America are spending $68 billion on that one platform. That math does not work anywhere. It does not make any sense based on the household penetration that they have. So I think that's the one. Let's not lose sight of how big the number is. I think 2, are we done? No. Every survey I've seen, including one that just came out a couple of months ago, said 1 in 4 U.S. adults are seriously considering cutting the cord in the next 12 months. So I think that's, I think that number is going to continue to grow. So that's 1 in 4 of the 50% that are left are thinking to leave. But then I think once you kind of have that ecosystem, you have to pause and say, well, what really is linear? Because at the same time, you see massive acceleration of MVPDs like YouTube TV and others, where they're basically getting the same content, and in many cases, the exact same ad load in some cases on the network. They're just not watching it via linear TV. They're watching it via their MVPD. So I think, also as we're moving into this new norm of what CTV is, CTV really is TV today. How we think about the cord, I think we're going to stop breathlessly watching the cord cutting numbers and start focusing more on who's actually in front of the TV. How many hours are they in front of ad supported TV? Because that's the key metric that we're all looking at in our industry versus non-ad supported. And that's where I get really excited, because you look at, what's the fastest growing section of TV viewership today? It's FAST, right? Free ad supported TV. So I think that there's tons of opportunities for engagement on advertising. The reason why the industry panics about cord cutting is they directly correlate cord cutting with ad supported, but I think those don't line up any longer with how consumers are now viewing and watching TV.
Yeah, no, you bring up an excellent point, which is at some level the bane of my
Just
existence.
only one excellent point?
Many excellent points, but one in particular that sort of struck me, which is that depending on the point the person doing the article or survey wants to make, YouTube TV and Hulu Live TV and the Sling, which account for something like 14 million viewers, a not insignificant number. If they want to make a point that, cord cutting is really happening, that gets included in cord cutting. They want to make a point the other way. No, it's part of mainstream TV. And it seemed to me anyway, it's always seemed like it's linear TV. It's just delivered differently. It's a very different thing than saying, okay, I'm going to give up, my cable bundle. Exactly. The second excellent point that you make, though, is that most of the spend is still on linear. Joel, what the hell? Like, why is that happening? Like, why are brands afraid to move their money over to CTV?
Look, I think that we are in the midst of a transformation of how media is consumed and monetized. It's been linear TV, set it and forget it, go have martinis with Don Draper style for 60 plus years. Media buyers have a level of comfort, established relationships, and plays that they call. You go participate in the upfront, you place your buys, you move on to the next thing. Connected television advertising, when done properly, despite the fact it's the same content, despite the fact it's predominantly the same device, audience, and household, requires considerably more work and more strategy. Now, the marketers that look at that as an opportunity to differentiate and drive more performant campaigns are going to roll up their sleeves and embrace it. But there's another subset of advertisers who kind of begrudgingly acknowledge that, wait a minute, the way I've been doing television advertising is degrading in terms of the number of eyeballs I'm reaching, the performance I'm extracting, et cetera. And it just becomes another element, another disparate platform they've got to learn. And so I think that we're all just creatures of habit, and old habits die hard. But without doubt, we watch the same e-marketer stats that Tony referenced about households and viewership. The dollars always follow that. And so we're just in a point beyond critical mass where the dollars will continue to leave that massive vault of 60 plus billion of linear TV. It'll just be a gradual transition.
Yeah, I'd love to build on that. I would suggest firstly, completely agree. Secondly, I think this notion of crossover starts to raise questions around these media buying agencies. They're currently structured in a linear first way. That's how they do business. They kind of, the centerpiece of the media plan is that linear purchase. As that flips, these structures and these behaviors are going to change. And I'll merge it with a point that Dallas made, and I think it's worth emphasizing. I think we're all really excited by this rapid shift into connected TV. And at the same time, we need to watch how much of that is actually ad supported. If you're a marketer, if you put aside things like product placement and other kinds of integrated sponsorships, really the opportunity to connect with your audience, it's either in the operating system or it's in an ad that's placed in commercial breaks within the unit. And so ad supported streaming TV, that's the metric to watch. And when that flips to a certain tipping point, I think you'll see the structures of the agency media buying sort of machine change. And I think that is the point where we will fully recognize that maybe it's both of your neighbors that are no longer watching linear TV.
Dallas, what do you guys? I mean, like, what's your thought on why we haven't seen dollars follow eyeballs?
I don't think we should all be surprised by this. I think, if you think about, the history of advertising, the medium is fairly slow to evolve to new platforms. So you think about radio ads. They were literally just print ads read on the radio. The first TV ads were just radio ads with a screen on, with an image on it, right? The first CTV ads, and sadly, many that we're still stuck with today, are just 30-second linear ads squeezed into CTV. So if you're an ad buyer, if you're looking to buy advertising, no one's given you a reason to change. No one's given you a reason to say, I want my MTV. I want to move to something different, more exciting because of all the benefits. I think we're starting to see that. Now you're starting to see a lot more. I know we'll talk about it later, but a lot more performant capabilities, a lot more creative opportunities to go beyond the 30-second ad, a lot more data opportunities that haven't been available in any type of TV or really CTV before are now coming online. And as the ad buyer becomes more aware, as the CMO on down becomes more aware of that, I think you're going to start to see this natural demand to now I have a reason to want to move. I've kind of felt instinctively I shouldn't be in TV linear alone because 1 in 2 households aren't seeing my ads, but I haven't really known why I should move. What's going to be the accelerant that gets me? And now all these positives on the other side of the ledger, reasons why this is better to shift to, I think are starting to move dollars.
Right. It's always, go on, Joe. I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. I want to inject something onto that because I think there's a degree of truth, exactly what Dallas has said. But I think at the same time, inherent in the fact that even if this is the same ad content on the same living room device, at the end of the day, it's delivered digitally, which is to say for the marketers that are doing this right, it already is wholly differentiated from traditional linear television advertising because I'm not spraying and praying to everyone in the Los Angeles DMA to sell my running shoes, right? I can all of a sudden begin applying some of the same tried and true digital targeting and measurement technology that existed up until CTV in the digital display, online video, and social ecosystems onto the big screen in the living room. And I think that that's really where it gets exciting. I don't think enough media buyers, particularly enough traditional linear television advertisers, have come to that epiphany yet. But that is at Strategus one of the greatest differentiators. We can take the exact same budget that's running in linear television and serve it only to the audiences that are that much more likely to convert and generate a much better ROAS and performant campaign relative to what it would have been in linear.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. What I would say is the majority of them are still spraying and praying. And that's why you see, ad after ad being completely irrelevant to you on your CTV feed. Whereas if you open your Facebook feed, it's something you actually probably want or have looked for or have cared about or have had some sort of connectivity with. So I think you're absolutely right. The capability is there. the awareness is starting to bubble up that there's something better out there.
Yeah, I might use this opportunity to just tease out something that we intend to really around CES. This is something we intend to release with an industry partner. But we expect in Q1 one of the biggest conversations related to exactly this point, even before the shift beyond the crossover point occurs, is the fact that share shift needs to happen. The inefficiencies in linear we've already realized pretty egregiously, actually. So if you're keeping an eye on your reach and frequency, if you're keeping an eye on the conversion rates and the efficacy of what you're doing, most brands, the average brand that's advertising on TV is putting too much into that medium. And I think you're going to start seeing more and more hard data behind answering the questions, just how much, what is the right amount to move? Where should I shift my dollars to? Should it just be CTV? I think this is going to become a hot topic kicking off at CES, but through Q1.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, the other thing which all of you have touched on is that as much as agencies will say, oh, we're video agnostic, then you say, oh, so I talked to your video agnostic team. It's like, no, talk to our TV team, or no, talk to our programmatic team. So it's like, so they're not like that. So I do want to bring something else up, which is that, when streaming was streaming came out, it was still very much like programmatic, like digital. In other words, with a lot of sort of audience-based targeting. But that's led to a whole bunch of problems, from privacy to transparency to brand suitability. But now we're hearing a lot about contextual targeting, right? And how that's sort of able to solve a world of hurt, if you will, on that. And for those of you out there who are unfamiliar with it, contextual targeting basically means targeting the show based on what's on the screen. And it can be anything from the genre of the show to the emotion that was happening in the scene before, to the music, to the actors or that are on it. It's a whole range of things. It's basically saying, we don't care who's actually we won't ever know who these people are. We don't care as much as we care what they're watching, and that makes the ad relevant. So Dallas, you guys have a whole system on this to an extent. You want to talk about that?
Well, like, I think contextual advertising is so hot, in your words, because most TVs are so dumb. And the reality is, you need contextual targeting for the exact reason you just identified. The TV has no idea who's watching. And that's another reason why we've not seen the migration of ad dollars into TV. Just because you watch football does not necessarily mean that you're in the market for a Ford, despite all my research. Maybe 30% of the audience is, but what if I want to target 100% of people who are in the market for a Ford, who I know are a truck buyer and are ready to buy one? So Telly's approach is a little bit different. To get a free Telly, everyone can get a free TV, 55-inch TV for free. You have to answer 100 questions, demographic, contextual, psychographic questions about the household. You tell us about your passions, what you love. How do you travel? Where do you eat? Do you eat out? Are you in the market for a car? Where do you, do you like sports? All these types of things. And you freely share them in a way that is 100% transparent as part of this value exchange. And you do it for two reasons. One, you do it to get a great TV. We think the smartest TV ever built. But you also do it because we're making an agreement with you that says we're going to deliver more relevant ads to your house. If you never eat out, if you tell us you do not go to fast food restaurants, we're going to tell McDonald's they probably shouldn't advertise on you and stop wasting money. If you're telling us you're in the market for new car insurance and you currently have car insurance company X and you're switching, we're probably going to tell car company X, don't worry about wasting your money on this person. And we're going to tell car company Y, insurance company Y, you may want to advertise this person. They're looking to switch. So this data is available that lets you drive just a far more, relevant relationship that doesn't require kind of the ready, fire, aim of contextual advertising.
Gotcha. Tony, you want to rebut that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. If I'm honest, I kind of have a foot in both camps on this one, because just putting my pure marketing, almost theoretical hat on, I think context is really critical, especially with the technology that's available now. DCO, you can alter your message based off the content that's there. I think it's really powerful. So just to use a really obvious and simple example, if you're an auto manufacturer, some of the prevailing wisdom is let's avoid news content. Let's avoid content around a horrible car accident, let's say. But maybe that's just not a great environment for you to be touting your new leather seats and your stereo, but possibly a great environment for you to be saying, look, here's some advanced safety features that can save lives. We make this And I think the context helps you adjust the message. Now, when I say I've got a foot in each camp, I am a believer in context, but at the same time, I think the practicalities can mean that an alternate path might be more judicious to use if you're the marketer. So for example, maybe you can't afford to buy that Super Bowl slot, and that's a context that you would want to be associated with. You can still reach that same audience. You could do sports lovers, football lovers, or viewers of that game or any other game, and hit them in another context, and it can be a much more efficient way to hit the audience that you're after. So I think for a marketer, this is really the art of it. Like, where are the elements where we are going to sort of pay a premium, make the connection we want, customize the message, or where are the parts of the media plan we're going to go for a more efficient play? And I don't think there's a right answer. In fact, I think there needs to be a balance of both of those elements in a holistic media plan.
The only thing I would maybe nudge back on is I think that is a completely fair statement in a reality where you can't have one-to-one advertising with the television at the household level. And we simply think you can. We think you can have a one-to-one relationship with the household if you're invited in, if you have that data sharing relationship that says, where the consumer says, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, here's what I'm in the market for, here's what I'm not in the market for. Give me these ads. Because I want them. I don't need to guess if they want an auto ad. I know if they're in the market for a vehicle. So I think the goal that we need to try to push to, the more we can push to, is one, getting consumers comfortable that they can trust and have a transparent relationship with us on how we do advertising, so they know that they have some skin in the game, whether they're being compensated with the device or they're being compensated with their time. And by time, I mean a better advertising experience. I think that absent that, of course, contextual is where we have to go. But I would hope we would kind of nudge more towards that one-to-one, more relevant and more, I think, impactful experience.
Yeah, I like the
Joel,
term. I'm going to use that. But I would just say, I actually do agree. I just think the rub, because I believe it's the addressability. Joel mentioned it before. Dallas, you mentioned it before. Like, it's the precision nature of CTV. The thing is, though, when you start getting too precise, you start to lose scale. Like, if you're getting too precise, is it worthwhile? Is the investment actually going to yield anything for the advertiser? And you're not wrong. Like, you are right. The ability for us to have a one-to-one relationship exists right now. It is a positive one. It makes the experience better for everyone involved. But you need to keep your eye on the scale, and you need to have sort of a broad tapestry of tools at your disposal. I would pose.
Joel.
Well, I mean, from a marketer standpoint, from a strategist standpoint, I want both. Right? I want the best of both worlds. There's applications and use cases for both. If I have to choose, though, if budgets are finite, which they always are, I start with an audience-centric approach. I think that there's absolutely value in use cases for having your brand contextually present and relevant, right? The auto example is perfect. You know, if I'm selling a new pair of basketball sneakers and Nikola Jokic is my spokesperson, I'm going to want that campaign to have some NBA basketball exposure, some Nuggets exposure, but that type of content is inherently finite. And we know that the people that watch that content also watch dozens of hours of other television and streaming content every week as well. And so to have that 1-2 punch of audience-centric, reaching that basketball shoe shopper wherever they are really matters. But then having kind of that cherry on top of relevant, contextually based targeting matters, especially when I have creative that aligns with it. And I think that practical real-world limitations, going back to Dallas's point, humble brag here, Strategus ran what is regarded as the world's first programmatic CTV campaign in 2015. And want to know what creative we used? The exact same creative that was running on linear television, right? Like, whoop-de-doo, we did it, but we didn't maximize the potential. Now, suffice to say that we have sense, but the point is really relevant for Dallas to say that, because if we're just going to run the same vanilla creative, both on an audience targeted standpoint and a contextually targeted standpoint, we're wasting some of the potential and the capability. So I feel like if you're going to utilize this myriad of opportunities from audience targeting and content-based targeting, you've got to make sure that you've mapped this out and you're taking advantage by having creative relevancy, that you're trying to message individually to each individual cohort within your target audience. And I think we're still just at a really nascent point in the industry where we're not quite doing that. Now, AI can probably lean in and help us make multivariate creative in a meaningful, scalable way, but not yet. That's where we hope it's going, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just two things I'll point out, which I find sort of interesting, is one, there doesn't seem to be any reason you can't do both. Like one of the beautiful things about streaming is that we have all this data suddenly, and the data can tell you both who the audience is and then what's going on the TV. So for years, just you all know this, but for the folks at home, when they first took TV and digitized it, they forgot to put any metadata against it. So you would have things like it'd be like Seinfeld S2, E3, or sometimes it would say Seinfeld third season, second episode, and the computers wouldn't realize that that's the same show. And so there was no way to sort of tell. One of the beautiful things about AI is that it can actually go in and say, okay, this is, they're in a car, they're in the kitchen, they're laughing, this is funny, there's rock music in the background, whatever it is. But all these cues that you can then say, okay, we know who's in the market for a car, and we have a funny commercial. Let's find a place where a funny commercial is going to work better than where it's not. So that's that. I mean, to me, that just seems like sort of where we're headed. The other thing, I forget which one of you had brought it up, is the scale issue. So too often people come from, especially people who are used to buying digital, where there's two options, right? Meta and Google pretty much. And they say, I want to reach left-handed jugglers. And Google's like, yeah, we've got 150,000 of them. But then you go to to Pluto or Peacock and they're like, neither of them are watching this week. But you need that sort of scale. And I think contextual can sort of add that in. In other words, when you're like, okay, we're not reaching as many people in our target as we wanted to, but we know that people who like this sort of thing or who might find a funny commercial entertaining, we can sort of spread that out. So that just used to be an interesting piece. But I want to sort of move along here. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of with advertising is this notion of self-serve ads for SMB. There's a couple of companies that are starting to do this now. It's an interesting proposition. I mean, basically what it seems that they looked at what Facebook had done, and said, okay, if you all remember back to Cambridge Analytica, and we're like, oh, we need to boycott Facebook. And then it was like, well, actually, most of their clients are these small businesses. And the driving factor on this is AI, that suddenly you can make self-serve TV commercials using AI. And we're just at the very beginning of this. So I'll go to you, Tony, on this since you're nodding over there. Like, is that going to be a thing? Are we going to be able to sort of bring in a lot more small businesses? Will they have the budget? Will that change TV essentially in bringing in so many more advertisers?
Yeah, super hot topic. I would expect this to really blow up through 2025 and beyond. So, you identifying AI in the mix, I think, is important. I think you've got a couple of trends here. I think you're going to see CTV increasingly go local. I think with programmatic ability to buy, with ACR starting to identify the local slots more and more effectively as opposed to national slots, I think that's really opening up. And then you mentioned the other critical ingredient, the application of AI is really what opens it up. Like you also mentioned, players such as Meta. Meta kind of pioneered this notion of buying on an objective, and we will help you make the ad. So you could be a corner store hairdresser, be able to just quickly have an ad unit made, deploy it in this environment, and it works. You know if it works, if it's converting. The real barrier within television and CTV environments has been the need for production value and production costs to create the ad. As AI improves more and more and more, the ability to create an AI generated ad, and we're starting to see, or should I say hear, these AI voiceovers are starting to become more and more common. And I think it's only a matter of time before you start to see literally the visuals start to follow. When you're that hairdresser, you're able to make the ad via AI, you're able to buy it programmatically, and you're able to participate in a highly addressable environment. I think we're on the precipice of really unlocking a segment of the market that has not really been buying ads on CTV.
Can I inject some perspective on that? Because
Sure.
I love where Tony's going with that. And fundamentally, academically, in a vacuum, I agree with that. But I think there's two major real world blockers that are going to prohibit self-serve from being a major scalable solution for SMBs. And the first is that unlike the Google and the Meta ecosystem, there isn't a single dominant inventory platform that can offer all of the access to all of the audiences and the content we need. right? Like one may argue Trade Desk is close, sure, but what about Amazon and what they're doing? What about what we inevitably expect Netflix will do? What about when Apple finally enters the game, which is a really poorly kept secret, but it seems like all signals are pointing to that. You've got to be able to access across multiple different platforms, multiple different inventory sources. You've got to integrate data from your own first party. You got to try and enrich that with third-party data. To do that from a self-serve standpoint, we've seen companies come and go that just have not cracked that code. There's a few out there, and they're doing okay. They're not killing it. But the other thing to factor in is, aside from that, SMBs, right? They don't have full-fledged marketing departments. They don't have interns doing TikTok dances, right? If we got the corner store hairdresser, that individual doesn't necessarily want to have to go out and learn another platform on top of Meta and on top of Google, let alone one that's infinitely more complex, infinitely more risky, right? If you accidentally let your Meta campaign run over the weekend, whoops, you spent a couple grand. If you run your programmatic CTV campaign incorrectly over a weekend, you spend a couple $1,000,000. You're on the hook for that. So I feel like it would be this advertiser utopia. And for every SMB, you could just swipe their credit card and start serving ads like in Facebook. But I feel like these two factors, at least what we're hearing from our clients is like, I don't want that hassle. I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't have to worry about that. I want to cut hair. I just want more people walking in. And obviously then partnering with somebody to provide that managed service component until a single player enters and dominates the space, I think is kind of how it's going to be.
So
Well, I like that you said that. Oh, sorry, Dallas.
you go.
Could I say one thing?
Yeah.
I think for this exact reason, you're going to see the rise of these independent agencies taking that job. So maybe it's almost like when they're rolling out fiber optic cable, there's like fiber to the home or fiber to the node. I think what we'll see next year is almost the fiber to the node solution, and to the home might be at some point. I just can't disagree with you, Joel. I think you're right. But I do think these independent agencies play a role in bridging the gap there.
I think there's two things that I would address that I think are interesting. There's the local aspect, and then there's the SMB. And local does not necessarily have to mean SMB. So I'll give you an example. So State Farm's an advertiser with us. So our technology is able to, within about a half a second, recognize any State Farm commercial that's on broadcast TV on the top screens. They're watching NBC. We recognize there's a State Farm commercial. Then our technology puts on the bottom screen, and that ad unit right there, a localized State Farm commercial for the local State Farm agent from Columbus, Ohio. And you can click that ad and immediately go to that State Farm agent's website, because we have a web browser on the TV. So with your remote, you can click the ad, launch it, and State Farm agent Susie from Columbus, Ohio, her website pops up on the top screen. Or if you don't want it to pop up on the top screen, we can have a QR code and you can go straight to your phone. That's taking this huge, beautiful, largest screen in the house and making it a powerful local performance driver. So I think we're going to see more of that, how brands are thinking creatively about how to drive it local. I do think on the second piece, on the SMB side, like I mean, I don't know if I disagree with what was said by Joel, but I mean, Facebook built a pretty good business out of small business owners being able to manage their own accounts. And figure out how to do a Facebook ad campaign. And I think that if we can get TV to be that simple, which we should be able to do with the technology today, as I think we shared about earlier, you can AI generate. There's 3 companies I can think of right now that will already take your Facebook campaign and turn it into a 15 or 20-second CTV commercial with no effort on your ends. It's all done by AI. It takes your campaign, whips it, puts it, loads it right in there. You set up your limits, $100 a week, whatever you want to do, and you're off the races. So I think the onus is on us to make it point and click easy. And I think you're seeing a lot more of that. We'll be leaning more and more into the SMB space as well, because we just think, you know, the ability to not interfere with the top screen while you're watching, but have the local Chinese restaurant say, hey, it's 6 o'clock. Do you want to order Chinese food or whatever else it might be? They're a really powerful tool to drive some local performance actions. They're I think, pretty that will change how we think about what we use that big screen for advertising for. It's not just about brand awareness. It's about driving immediate actions. And if you can localize those immediate actions, I think they become even more powerful.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's interesting to me. I mean, have you all seen there's a Toys R Us commercial that they made with AI that looks pretty good. Let me see if I can quickly call it up and share it on the thing, because it's oops. Because it's worth seeing. I mean, it's only like it's a minute. Hold on, let's see.
Drop it in the chat section.
Or I might even be able to play it here. So
Want to change.
here we go.
Did you ever wonder how Toys R Us and Jeffrey the Giraffe came to be? The son of a bike shop owner, Charles Lazarus, had a vision that would go on to change toy stores forever. Lazarus, may all of your dreams come true too. And the dream continues on with a Toys R Us at every Macy's.
Okay, so I mean that's pretty wild. Hopefully you all saw that and the screen share worked. But that's pretty wild that we can do that now. So just imagine like, you're to what you guys were talking about, where like the local business is able to come up with something like that, and then, say it's a Chinese restaurant, then you can actually order off of it too at the end of it. So there's seems like there could be a lot, but it will take a lot of work, but I think it's sort of a fascinating thing. And there is that thing of like, does the, there's going to be a big curve. So I think there's two things. One, I think there's going to be the big curve of convincing your local beauty shop owner to actually take the time to figure this out. It's still, as easy as it is, it's still something to figure out. And then the other side is, I think everybody's realizing that, you know what, no one I know is on Facebook anymore. Like, why am I spending money there? You know, so there's that part. So it'll just be interesting. I did want to go since we're talking about AI, I wanted to ask you guys, also with you, Joel, on this one, like so AI is allowing us to have a lot more personalization, just in general, in sort of the terms of the programming we see, the ads we see, and all that, and the way the programming is arranged and all that. I mean, how much impact do you think we're going to see in the next year or so, or is that something like down the road?
You know, this is an interesting topic. And Tony, I know you mentioned CES. Like, I feel like last year's CES was like the last couple of years have been like the year of AI, right? And like for those of us that are OGs in the programmatic RTB space, like everything has inherently always been built on machine learning. And so I can't help but say that I feel like there's a lot that is today AI that's just good old fashioned machine learning that just got a little brand refresh. So, we lean heavily on that for programmatic advertising. We lean heavily on that in our data and analytics department to help make our insights a little bit more meaningful, a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more plain English and easy to understand. When AI becomes prevalent and impactful to the user and the viewer, I think we're still a ways out, right? I think the most compelling concept to me right now is the ability for AI to help that SMB advertiser develop multivariate creative on the fly, right? Relevant to what's happening right now, what's contextually relevant to the creative they're watching. We haven't found that yet. It's certainly where it's going. But I can't say that right now I'm just ready for the AI revolution to take over, notwithstanding the fact that a lot of what we're doing could be technically considered AI when I would just call it machine learning.
Gotcha. Dallas, what are you guys, I mean, thinking on that? Are we going to start seeing like personalized news services, news channels and all that, or is that a ways off?
I think it's a lot sooner than you think. So, I got to put my Roku hat on and go back in time. So Roku launched this program that was basically their what's on this week type of program, obviously designed to draw in more eyeballs to be able to sell ads. Big production studio, they hired talent, Maria Menounos and some football player and cameras and studios and script writers, and it took they would do days of filming to pile up all these shows. Well, if you turn on a Telly, you're going to see something called Telly Today. And you'll be welcomed by an AI, host who talks to you about the biggest things on TV today, the biggest news today, and what's on that you should watch. And that's created every single day. And we're doing it for a fraction of the cost of what used to be, what is still being done in other places. So I think you're going to find more uses for AI that are value driven, both for the advertiser, for the content owner, but also for the consumer. People love, great. I mean, the number one ask people have of their TV today is, what should I watch? It's the number one thing they're trying to figure out. So anything that we can do with AI or other technology to help the consumer's path to content get quicker and more efficient, we're all for.
Dallas, I just got to say, if that technology could apply to like new seasons of shows, when there's like a year or two in between seasons and you get upset about the new one, but you're like, I don't remember what happened. If that could just live on top of and recap everything,
recap it for you,
that would be amazing.
There was, you laugh, but there was, I don't know if you all remember this, go way back to early Game of Thrones, when they had this, if you watched it through the HBO app, there was a thing on it that you could click and it'd be like, because like they would always introduce characters and you go, who are these people? Like they all kind of, all these weird names. And you could click on it and it would tell you who they were and how they related to everybody else. It was the best thing ever. Anyway, I just, little thing there. Tony. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Dallas with regard to the content recommendations. So the way we look at it is right now, I think each OTT, each app on your TV does a good job of saying, because you watched A, you might like B, C, D. But the thing is, it's sort of trapped within each of the 10, 20, 30 apps that you have. And so we actually had some announcements earlier this year. We had our second ever WebOS Summit. For those that aren't familiar, all modern LG TVs run on WebOS. It's the operating system. It's kind of like our developer summit. But we announced some big intentions to, and I think in 2025, you'll see some consumer level integrations of this, have these recommendations live at the glass level, where you turn your TV on across all of the services that you have access to, maybe including some subscriptions, some free, because you watched certain profiles of shows across all of them. Here are things that you could watch, and it's no longer trapped within the app. And then I think the other consumer level thing that AI kind of really brings, we're going to roll out, and we haven't announced a timeline on it, but it has been formally announced, this voice recognition for profile login. So I've got my LG remote here. The idea would be, hey, help me find something to watch. It recognizes my voice. It recognizes that it's Tony, not my son Maddie. Brings up my profile, my recommendations, and it's a login-less login. And I think there are things like that AI unlocks that were probably not really possible before, and like literally in the palm of consumers' hands. Will be in 2025.
I love that Tony just has the LG remote on his desk ready to go.
I mean, I have the remote too.
You got the LG remote. That's great.
Let me throw something in here. I don't, but you know what I have is my smartphone, right? And so let's talk about, do consumers want to spend meaningful time engaging with their television using a remote? Or could we continue the conversation with cross-device deterministic retargeting to engage with them on these devices, where we're all much more comfortable, much more likely to be able to shop and convert, and obviously introduce now a much more trackable and price-efficient medium to include in a CTV campaign? Sorry to throw for the loop there, but I feel like we got to acknowledge that no one watches CTV without another digital device in their hand. I think Facebook's
that's
94% of people watch TV with a smartphone. So how can one's campaign integrate the other digital device we know is virtually glued to their hand?
You just made the business case for Telly. That's why we created a dual screen, because the average consumer has a second screen. And we think that you should be able to move most of what you're doing on that second screen onto the TV in one and synchronized experience. So just like the iPhone eliminated entire classes of products, you no longer see the Walkman aisle or the GPS aisle or even the digital camera aisle at Best Buy. We're going to be eliminating the sound bar. We're eliminating, the camera device. We're eliminating the voice assistant. We're eliminating a bunch of these things that come with the TV. And then we want you to be able to, while you're watching the TV, do you want to have your fantasy sports scores below you? Great. Do you want to be able to throw a bet on a game? Great. You click and make a bet. So the goal is to try to let you put that phone down on the charger and have an experience with the biggest screen in the house and take what you used to be doing on 4.5 or 5 inches and put on 55 inches in a much better experience. So that's our hope anyways.
Dallas, I love that. Can you answer a question for me though?
Sure.
When you're a household co-viewing, right? And husband and wife and 2 kids are all sitting in the living room and they're all on their devices. How do you unify, or who wins and who gets the secondary screen and tell?
Well, I love that example because I have kids. So my kids can actually play Flappy Birds on the bottom screen while I'm watching football game on the top. So it actually does bring my kid into the room while I'm doing this. He was playing chess the other day. He was playing chess on the bottom screen while I was watching football on top. So it is, I think you're hitting on a bigger point though, which is I think we need to think differently about the living room. And we need to think about how the living room is still the room we spend more hours in than any other room in the home awake. And how do we want to be engaging in the living room? Is it just with a top of funnel brand conversation that's saying, but awareness, or are we realizing that the technology has enabled us to have a much deeper connection with the consumer and turn the TV, again, the biggest screen in the house, into a much more powerful hub for everything that you drive? You should be able to talk to your TV and tell it to change your temperature thermostat, show you who's at the front door, order a pizza, schedule a meeting, connect with grandma on the camera that's built in. These should all be things that we do. And I've said this before because I've been on a lot of panels with LG folks. The LG makes refrigerators smarter than most TVs in the home. So LG's smart refrigerator knows what's in your refrigerator. When you need to reorder it, it'll tell you what's in the door even of the refrigerator and let you make a shopping list. Your TV should at a minimum be as smart as your refrigerator. And present company excluded on this call, most TVs aren't that smart. And that's the efforts. How do we get them to be the smartest device in the home so they can help you with those things in life?
Right. I mean, let me just, I mean, we can, I'll let you answer, but it brings up, which you can sort of factor into this, is this whole conversation that's been going on now about the TV operating system being in the battle for that being so much more important than, anything else right now, is, because it controls so much, as we've just discussed. Tony.
Yeah, obviously there was a lot, there's a lot in there, but I will just say I do agree mobile is a critical ingredient there. With regards to shoppable, it is the way people are comfortable shopping right now, and I think it's an important part that I just don't see going anywhere. Will it be more sophisticated? I think it currently is and is getting more sophisticated. I love the Amazon example on Black Friday. Did you guys see the shoppable units baked straight into it? Didn't really require anything else. And I think that it's more the theme of like shoppable is in there. And then, it brings us to what Alan was sort of talking about, as well as the OS. What can that operating system kind of really bring from an experiential perspective? And I think everyone on this call has heard me say this before, but I just truly believe when you talk about connected TV, it's not your grandmother's TV. It is a different beast. You can create ads that were not possible before. The launch of the experience has a homepage, and that homepage has an advertising opportunity. And there is an argument that first impression is more valuable than some of the other impressions within the experience. And so I think, I know it's been referred to as kind of like the OS wars and other things. I just think this is one logical element of TV maturing, of TV hitting its next evolution, where that operating system is providing the more immersive experience that Dallas was talking about. We see right now they're gaming, cloud gaming baked into their TV, cloud fitness. You can order your food. So maybe you're ordering the pizza and then you're burning off the calories, all via your TV, whether it's any of those 3 things. And so I think with the OS, it's becoming a more critically important part of the ecosystem for the consumer experience, and then tying it together for the advertisers trying to reach those consumers.
Joel, you're about to say something.
This is a really interesting time because I don't think there's one dominant player in the TV OS space, right? Like television market share predicates television operating system market share. There's a reason why you can walk into Costco or Best Buy and buy a TV as inexpensively as you can today. And I think a big portion of that, outside of efficiencies and logistics, is the fact that a lot of these TV OSs are subsidizing the cost of that TV because the opportunity to monetize that data down the road matters. I got to give a hat tip to Telly for just saying, hey, let's just take this exercise all the way through and forget subsidizing. We're just going to straight up make it free. I think though that I personally, not speaking as a marketer, but speaking as a television watcher, there's not been a TV OS that I like particularly, and certainly not one that I'm loyal to. And so how does one win if they can't ever achieve critical mass of market share? And then we got to introduce the fact that now all of a sudden we have a DSP who says we're going to throw our hat in the ring and we're going to make a better OS than anyone else. It's a fascinating time to be a consumer, but we're also the crash test dummies for this entire experience to see, is it a completely free TV with 2 screens? Is it a DSP backed OS in potentially longer tail OEMs? Is it arguably the highest quality, most known TV manufacturer in the way of LG and what they're establishing? I mean, we're in a really interesting time where this has all got to be settled, and I don't know who's going to win.
Well, it's choice, right? There's more choice than ever before. It's choice in the consumption patterns. Do I want to pay a subscription and not get ads? Do I want it free and I have ads? Do I want some sort of freemium version where it's an in-between? And I think the same goes for the hardware. And like your assessment on the hardware side, I think margins are very slim on the hardware side. And in the media business, it's a little bit different there. But the only, like, I actually agree with almost everything you said. The only thing that I would really push back on is, like, you put LG together with one of the other OEMs, it's literally half of the TVs in the US, a little more. And so there actually is a concentration around brands, and you're going to get a variety of people. You're going to get people who really care about having the latest and greatest 8K or whatever is next experience on the wall. You're going to get people who say, look, it doesn't matter to me. I really care about what's playing on the TV. And I think it's just choice. And I think choice is good for the consumer. I think it turns out to be good for the brands seeking to connect with the consumer. And so in that way, I do agree with what you said, but it was just that the consolidation around those large players, I think is necessary to point out.
I would just add, I completely agree with Tony on choice. So we have a slightly different approach to the market. We have a TV operating system that manages the dual screen experience, but we don't ship it with the streaming OS. We are not in the streaming OS wars. We welcome you to bring your own device. If you love Apple TV, if you love your Chrome, if you love your Roku, we want you to bring that and plug it right in. We're completely agnostic to that. We ship it with a free Google Chrome device for you to use to stream your favorite apps out of the box. But by design, the definition, we don't want to make the consumers have to make another choice put upon them by a company. So it's a bring your favorite streaming operating system and plug and go.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm curious.
Oh, sorry. What happens on startup of a TV? Obviously, you have the second screen, but is there like a home screen that's always consistent?
That you get welcomed by the Telly Today daily program, and then you can go. You choose then our technology reads the dongle and puts your apps on the bottom screen, and you're able to go directly into your streaming app of choice. So one Telly remote powers everything.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly curious with the OS thing is that as the innovations in the actual picture quality and the rest of the TV kind of level off, which they sort of have, does the operating system become that point of differentiation when you walk into a store and there's 2 fairly identical 65-inch TVs around the same price, and you're like, oh, I like the way this one, the operating system works on this. I like the layout on this. Or do people just not care? And that will be something to keep an eye on. We have a few minutes. We got a couple of questions. I'm gonna sort of take one. I'll take one of them. It's from Henry Villadiego, and he asks: once linear CTV crossover hits, say second half of 2025, will it still be broadcast dollars to digital dimes, or is it a one-to-one budget shift? And if it's the former, what impact will that have on content spend for studios/media owners?
Well, actually, typically right now the CPMs are higher within connected environments, and it goes back. Literally every panelist and Alan mentioned this earlier, but it goes back to the addressability. So the value of not having this incredible wastage means each impression is actually worth more.
Yeah.
I could not agree with that assessment more. As a matter of fact, the unspoken manifesto of Strategus is that connected television advertising today is fundamentally broken, particularly from a user experience standpoint. Like, we've talked here for 55 minutes and no one's addressed the fact that when you go on Hulu and you see the same ad for the same product from the same brand 17 times in a row, you really dislike that brand, and that brand just spent a ton of money to make you dislike them. Yes. So I think that what we need to address here no pun intended, is the fact that when you serve thoughtfully targeted, thoughtfully measured, particularly around how the frequency is capped, ads, that drives up a higher yield and a higher CPM for the publishers and the SSPs. And obviously it makes a better user experience for us viewers, because then we're not seeing an ad that's not relevant to us. We're not seeing the same ad 17 times in a row. The pipes and the tech is nearly all there for this utopia. It's just that what we're having is linear dollars entering the space with linear mindsets accompanying them, and not a lot of strategy around these really technical, harder to do things, which again goes back to why I don't think self-serve is going to win, because putting F caps on things requires a much more sophisticated setup. Integrating much more data requires obviously much more expertise. I think that ultimately that user experience, to answer the question, yeah, I think it's like linear dollars to like streaming $1.25s potentially.
I wish there was a thumbs up option on this. I would be thumbing up right now, but there's no thumbs up option on Zoom.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, to your point, Joel, I mean, I remember 15 years ago writing stuff that the promise of streaming was fewer, better targeted ads that brands would pay more money for, and consumers would react, well, not mind watching. So at some point we may get there. Before we sort of sign off here, I just wanted to ask, have any of you guys recently written a book that was just released?
That's a shameless plug. Wow. Thank you, Alan. Yes, I did write a book. We just published it and distributed it. It has very little to do with what we're talking about today, although there are a couple stories from the Roku distribution wars. It's called Communicating Under Fire, distributed now by Simon & Schuster. Find it on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. But yeah, I'm a little bit of an odd duck in the space. I started my first half of my career in politics, and then spent about a decade in the crisis communication space, managing nuclear disasters and all sorts of bad stuff before coming to ad tech. So there's a little bit of ad tech in there, but it's mostly about how to manage a reputation today.
No, because it just came out, so that's why I was asking. I literally came out like this week. So one last, sort of do a quick lightning round here. I'll start with you, Joel. What's the one trend that you think the industry is sort of sleeping on that we're going to see next year?
At the risk of being repetitive, the first thing that comes to mind is arguably the most prominent. It's that linear dollars are entering CTV accompanied by linear mindsets. You must ditch that bring your dollars, but adopt an audience-centric, data-driven, content-agnostic mentality. If you adopt that, your CTV dollars will go further and your brand will elevate relative to its peers.
Mr. Marlow.
I think it's shoppable. 2024, I believe, unarguably was a year where shoppable exploded. But I think in 2025 is where it matures. I think we're going to go beyond the QR code. I think there's going to be more sophisticated ways, more frictionless ways to make the payment, to receive the item. We have plans with regard to our WebOS Pay, for example. But I think you're going to see broad base across the industry. Shoppable TV will start to really grow up and become even more mainstream than it already is.
Okay, and take it home, Mr. Lawrence.
I agree with everything they both said. I'll just say what gets me most excited. We are at kind of the golden age of creative for television, with the opportunity to unlock capabilities that we've never had before. And when you go and meet with an agency's creative team, there literally are dozens of people that almost have tears in their eyes when you tell them you're going to unshackle them from a 30-second ad. And you're going to give them some freedom and flexibility to play on the biggest, most colorful and engaging screen in the house in a way they haven't been able to do for half a century. I mean, literally TV advertising is basically the same as it was 50 years ago. And that is changing dramatically with all the things that Tony and Joel and I have been talking about today. That gets me excited because there's no more collection of creative, artistic people that I've ever met than those who work in the advertising space. And they're going to light the world on fire in the next 12, 18 months with new ways to engage consumers on TV.
Excellent, excellent. I'll throw in my thing I think we're sleeping on is the degree to which AI is just going to change your overall experience as a consumer and just sort of make it so much more personalized and really sort of finally make it so that you don't go, oh my God, there's this massive stuff here and I have no idea like I thought I just clicked on that, it didn't work. Wait, maybe I need to go down. So I think we're just going to see a much more intuitive and better home screen experience overall. Anyway, thank you guys very, very much. This was awesome. Thank you. Really wonderful. Thank you, audience. We've had over 100 people here. So thank you guys for showing up. Take care now and bye-bye.